Mr. RC, Mr. Ma, good to see both of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. What is it like to be in this building? A building that is so much related to China's diplomacy and also to the respectable Chinese Premier Zhou as he received many foreign dignitaries over the decades in China's contemporary history.
Well, I'm just fascinated being here today. It's like the wheels of history have turned, and it's an honor. It's an honor that I'm actually here sitting in a room where former Premier Zhou Enlai used to be. And it has the echo of international relations. It has the echo of multilateralism. And it has a foundation of a spirit of enterprise when China was itself coming out from a long period of evolution of its own. And Zhou Enlai, in many ways, epitomizes that diplomacy that China unleashed to the rest of the world, where we saw China reaching out to Africa and developing relationships. For example, the famous Tazara Railroad, when China itself was poor, built a railroad between Tanzania and Zambia. So it's a fascinating moment to actually come here and visit it in my 5th year in the United Nations that I'm visiting a place like this. Absolutely honored.
History is right in this room and in this building, isn't it, Mr. Ma?
I visited Bandung twice. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's in the 80s, last century, about the negotiations for a peaceful settlement on the Cambodian War. I was there to cover the news. Right. I think the principle of the Bandung conference remains vital for the basic of principles on international relations. This is very, very important because the important idea is the peaceful coexistence. So now we should have this idea in the heads of every leaders of all the countries.
Yeah. As a witness to history and a seasoned journalist, that's what Mr. Ma believes the most important among all the principles. What do you think?
Bandung is a very special place, also because I worked in Indonesia for 3 years. Sure. I was there from 2001 to 2004 and had an opportunity to visit Bandung many times. Indonesia itself as a country is a country that I deeply respect. They are a very fascinating country. They've been a stable anchor in geopolitics for centuries. It's the largest archipelago in the world with 36,000 islands. It's a fascinating country, fascinating people, and it's a country that I've really enjoyed living and working in. Bandung, which happened in April 1955, epitomizes how the spirit of multilateralism got reignited. We had the signing of the UN Charter in 1945, but then we had the Cold War, which erupted. And during that Cold War, you had member states, you had China, you had India, you had Indonesia, you had Burma, you had Sri Lanka, really all coming together and looking at a new spirit of alignment, which gave rise to the non-aligned movement, which gave rise to also the dialogue between Asia and Africa, which was very, very important to kind of resurrect that spirit of multilateralism. And not just that, to resurrect a spirit of non-alignment. We don't need to get sucked into one side or the other in war. So in a sense, it epitomizes a continuation because the UN Charter was embraced very much as a preamble of the Bandung conference. But most importantly, the existence of the Panchshila or the 5 principles was adopted in this conference. And I think here, Premier Zhou Enlai, Jawaharlal Nehru all deserve a lot of credit for having brought this together with Burma or Myanmar into the spirit of the Bandung
They really
conference.
Echo each other's visions.
They really echo each other's. And I think, that was a historic moment. And I believe that historic moment has now become even more urgent to have it made into much more viableness given the complexities that we are facing now.
Especially now we are facing the danger of the big power rivalry. Some suggest China, United States, and other possibilities. What do you make of this rather complex situation while you are working in one of those big power countries?
So, for me, first of all, it's a privilege to work as the UN resident coordinator here in China, because it's a country which I have, when you look at the evolution of China, let's say after the opening up in 1979, when the country's per capita GDP was a mere $180, what it has achieved in its collective enterprise of investing in human capital, investing in business, investing in infrastructure, and lifting up over 800 million people out of abject poverty is remarkable, but it showed that how political will can actually move countries forward. I think China's role in this sphere of geopolitics is to reinforce multilateralism, and we are seeing that. China's emphasis on the United Nations, China's support to the whole Summit of the Future process that the Secretary General recently hosted in New York in September, and followed by the Pact of the Future. And recently on March 24th, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we hosted an international symposium on the Pact for the Future. I believe that China has a very important role in helping to calm the waters. This is a moment we need maturity, we need wisdom, we need strong political will in order to move this agenda forward, because people are suffering. We are facing a polycrisis, and we need China's leadership in the multilateral space.
People say, oh, that's probably only history. Bandung Conference, that's been so far away from us in terms of time. But Mr. Ma, as Mr. RC just earlier illustrated, how relevant do you think that is today?
I remember very clearly what Premier Zhou said at the conference. He said that we came for seeking consensus, not for argument. Now we are having lots of conferences, but the arguments is everywhere. So big countries, they argue every day. Small countries, they have no rights to speak.
True.
This is the problem. That is why we have to express our voices of Global South. You have to amplify the voices of Global South.
Yeah.
So as a news agency, we try to fill the gap of information, because the small countries, they don't have the ability to have their information sent to the other countries, or no, their voice not to be heard.
And by the way, no arguments, but only efforts for consensus. This takes a lot of wisdom. It's easy just to say the rhetorics. Everybody can recite the rhetorics, but it's not easy to seek consensus out of chaos, quote unquote.
But Tianwei, I'll say one thing, that the follow-through that Zhao Enlai had, or China had, on the Bandung conference, I have witnessed it firsthand with President Xi's Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, for example, and the solid cooperation that China has with the African continent. The UN, my office is very much part of those collaborations and the outcomes that have been. So I see that firsthand, which has happened, and I see this echoes the spirit of the Bandung conference.
I think the Bandung conference, the principles of Bandung conference is intertwined with the UN Charter.
Absolutely.
The UN is a place for countries to seek consensus, a platform for every country, big or small.
The UN needs to play that role, but can the UN play that role today?
This is precisely why, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, when he got elected for this role back in 2017, he came with one singular purpose, was to reform the UN, to make the UN fit for purpose. So in fact, I would say, Tianwei, that what the Secretary General is trying to do is to reposition the UN to be effective. And that is why the Summit of the Future had 5 overarching goals: to make sure that global governance, to make sure that we could accelerate the SDGs, to make sure that peace and security worked properly, to make sure that artificial intelligence, science, technology all came and did not become a tool of weaponization. And number 5, youth and future generations, our children, their children, what are they going to inherit into the future world? And I think this is vital, because people expect, regardless of differences of geopolitics, that one institution that can reflect the ideals and the ambitions of we the people.
Mr. Ma, how is China digesting the fact that some has been trying to walk away from what has already been achieved, which is not easy to come by for many players? For example, on the green development, it's not just China, but also many other examples around the world. It can bring wealth. It can bring better environment. It can bring tomorrow and the future, better potential. But why? How do you see some countries are walking away from this and say others, you do not need to participate in that. Don't do it.
I think it's some of the interests. This is the most important. Not arrogance, not jealousy, but it's
Fundamental interest.
One country or some of the countries, they want to dominate the international affairs. They even don't go through the United Nations. They overpass. If the United Nations may make some of the decisions, they think it's okay. It's meet my needs. I agree. If you don't, I just I go away and do what I want to do. So I covered the war in last century, the Iraq War, Kuwait War, the Cambodian War. I covered all these wars. You know, what's the reason? Some of the war there is no reason at all. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to explain that. Right. It's a very difficult question.
Yeah. Right. I see, here is where we need wisdom. And this is where China can play an important role as a 5,000-year-old civilization to be able to rise above the fray. Yeah. This needs a more of a Taoist kind of, approach to things. I believe we need to rekindle that faith. That is why, when initiatives such as the Global Development Initiative or even the Global Civilization Initiatives allows an interplay of dialogue, of civilizational consequences are very relevant, because if you look at Asia today, it is inevitable. We are seeing the rise of Asia. If you look at the ASEAN market, 650 million people, it is a progressive market. You look at China, you look at the entire ecosystem of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all these countries which are emerging, young populations on one side, aging population on the other. The interplay of economics is very consequential here. But this connection which is happening with Africa is opening up an entire new arena. It's a new horizon, because I'm saying, Africa is going to have 2.5 billion people by 2050. It is going to be the future of consumption and production as populations are aging.
It's not just Africa, but also Latin America,
Absolutely.
The Global South countries.
The Global South countries.
So here comes the question, what the Global South countries can do together. And also, how will the Global South countries cooperate with the others around the world?
The United Nations still remains the most...
Time.
No, that is why the Secretary General is convening these countries. But that is why the spirit of the Bandung Conference needs to be resurrected.
There are already some grand plans supported by countries, not only in just Global South, but also the Global North, so to speak. For example, Belt and Road Initiative. Mr. Ma, how do you see that can be further updated and meet the needs of the level of discussion, the level of wisdom that we need to explore today?
I think the very important thing is the development. If you develop your economies to a certain level, you have the right to speak, or your voice will be heard by other countries. If your economy is decreasing or is not developed very good, that will be a problem. Sure. So that is why the Global South countries should cooperate closely and for development. Sure. And on the other hand, for their security, because they come together, have a group. The group is not for we said it's not a block of politics, but a block of development. Then when we develop our economy to a certain level, then the South, global South, will be, their voice will be heard, both in the United Nations and throughout the world.
Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.